Business Growth Talks podcast is created and hosted by Mark Hayward. In this show, we talk about how to grow a business in the growth stage. The growth stage is often marked by rapid developments, increased revenue, and an escalating customer base. In each episode, we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who have grown businesses, and we cover topics like scaling processes, market expansion, financial management, human resource and talent development, and customer retention. If you are looking for actionable advice, tips, and techniques on how to grow, run and build your business, this is the podcast for you.
Today we have Jonathan Green, who is a visionary entrepreneur, AI consultant, and best-selling author of over 300 books, including ChatGPT Profits. His entrepreneurial journey began an unexpected setback in 2010 when he was fired from his job from a top American university. Before this turning point, Jonathan had spent 10 years in academia, culminating in a master's degree. After being let go, Jonathan quickly found success in the online world, making more money within 6 months than he had done in his former job. Today, he runs Serve No Master, an AI consultancy and training platform from a tropical island, helping entrepreneurs automate business processes, free up time, and build revenue streams. We're really looking
I'm
forward
good.
to
I'm really
having
excited to be
Jonathan
here.
on
This
today.
is some of my favorite
Thank you,
topics
Jonathan.
to
How are
talk
you
about.
today? Look, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. There's going to be a bit more about your journey than maybe in normal episodes, because it is really interesting, the different areas that you've been in regarding academia and writing, ghostwriting, as well as an online business and an AI automation and AI platform as well. So there's a lot to talk about. So thank you very much for being with me today. As in all the first questions I asked to all of my guests is,
For
what
me,
does a
the business
business
mindset
mindset
means
mean to you?
treating whatever your business is, no matter how small, even if it's just an idea, like a business. It means that you think of whatever you put in as an investment, something you want to return on. For example, if you and I go to the cinema, we pay 10, 20 quid for movie tickets. We don't expect to make the money back at the end. However, if you and I go to a conference where we learn a new skill and we spend the same amount of money on a ticket, I expect to get that much value back. And the two assets you have are time and money. Those are the two tools, assets, resources that you have to grow your business. So it's very
Yep.
important at the beginning of every step to think, is this worth the investment? Am I using my time effectively? And so that's why it's very important to me that I give value, because everyone who listens or watches this video is giving an hour of their time. And so that's why over our hour together, I want to show how AI and automation can help everyone to have a 4-day weekend every week, how you can get 5 days of work done in 4 days without having to spend more time working on your business, how you can use AI and automation effectively. So it's important for someone to, anytime when I start reading a book, I want to know, well, what am I going to learn by the end? Is it worth it? The same thing we do when we watch a YouTube video. We want to know, is it will help my business? There's a very common mistake people make is beginning of a business, especially if they call it a side hustle. Side hustles almost always fail because of that terminology, which means I'm not taking it seriously. And it means I put money in and I don't expect to make money out. This is why someone might spend $10,000 launching a business, generate $1,000 and go, I just made $1,000. You lost 9,000. You didn't make money, you lost money, but you didn't count. That didn't count because that came out of the entertainment budget. And that's the mingling of fun time in our minds. If we don't take our business seriously, if we treat it like a hobby, and there's different ways this manifests. I'm sure you've seen people who try to start a business, but they don't tell anyone. So I meet a lot of people who go, I can't get any clients. And I say, how many people have you told what you do? Nobody. I can't tell anyone I do it until I have clients. You've created a catch-22. If I don't tell you what I do, how are you ever going to figure it out unless you interrogate me or randomly ask me? So whether it's SEO services or social media services or ghostwriting or AI services, all the different things I've done over the past 14 years, I tell people, like, it's not, I don't have this massive, like, really brilliant business idea other than I just tell everyone. And what I find is that if you tell everyone, someone will then go, oh, you know what? Jonathan is the only one I know who does that. Or it's top of mind. That usually leads to a friend of a friend messaging you or going, hey, do you still do this? Or I heard from so-and-so. That's how you can generate leads to start any business. And also, we don't want to tell people because we're afraid of failing and then everyone judging us, but also it creates a motivation. If you tell everyone you're going to run in a marathon and you have to train for 6 months to run a marathon, that
Yeah.
means every morning when you get up, you go, I have to get up because I've already told everyone. It creates an additional level of motivation. So I think that's actually a good thing. So the key to the business mindset is to treat it like a business, think of the ins and outs on a ledger, and to, just like any other business, you put up a sign and let people know even before you have your first customer.
That's amazing. It's a very detailed answer, and I really appreciate that because the idea, I always think telling people gives you an element of accountability as well, because people will say to you, "How's the marathon running going?" And if you haven't done any days yet, you're like, "Oh, I've got to do this as well." So if it's starting a business and someone asks you about it, so I think it is a motivator. And yeah, I've not thought about the side hustle. The side hustle idea is something that it's just a, if it's not making any money, it's a hobby. Let's be honest. It's not a business, it's not even a side hustle, it's a hobby that you're doing. I think it's an important distinction for people to make, and I love the answer. So thank you very
Los
much
Angeles. So I
for
was
sharing that.
born
Where are
in the
you from
Valley in Los
originally, Jonathan? Can I
Angeles.
ask?
I grew up in the 80s. My older sister went to high school with all of the 80s movie stars. So she would say, oh my gosh, all the time. And you definitely, it affects your
Right.
perspective growing up around celebrities. And like I went to, you'd go to school with a kid and then they're in a movie and then they're back like they're back gone for 6 months and then they're back. And it's like not a big deal
Mm,
because everyone's parents are in the movies. Like a lot of my friends' parents were movie stars. So that definitely affected how I don't get starstruck very often just because I'm so used to it. And that really does make a difference. So that is like the one skill I think I learned from where I originally grew up.
mm. And if you were to be starstruck by
Golly, right?
anyone, who would
So
that person be?
right now, probably I'm just thinking about it. It would be Alan Walker. He's a DJ from the Netherlands because he's my son's favorite DJ. It's not a big deal to me because I've met a lot of DJs. I toured as a DJ for a long time. I DJed all over the UK.
Okay.
But it's someone that my kids are a big fan of. So that might get me excited. I'm trying to think. It's no longer people for me. I've passed that phase. Like I've met so many really amazing people and business mentors. I've passed that phase, but I think that would be exciting because my son would be so excited. Like there's a concert near me on my birthday and I told him I was thinking of going. It's 18 and up. So my son
Right.
who's 8 cannot go. And I was like, I'll take a picture with him for you. And my son did not like that at all.
So you have a really interesting backstory in how you got to your business. And one of the things I realized or was reading about was that in your 20s you were in academia. You were working in, and you were, when you were working in that area, you got your degrees and your masters and then started there. When did you realize that your dream job wasn't in
What
academia?
people gave me advice that I didn't pay attention to. So when I was living in London and teaching, having finished my master's, one of my private clients was the head of a very large company from Eastern Europe, like billions and millions of dollars. They owned like hundreds of helicopters and thousands of trucks. Like he drew a picture once of all the departments of their company and it was so many boxes. So just like massive successful conglomerate. And he said, I don't doing this. You're not a teacher. You want to run a business. And I was like, no, I love doing this. And so I didn't listen. And then the next phase for me was I've always run small businesses on the side. I just never took them seriously. I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur because you think of the way to become an inventor is your parents are inventors. That's how I see it. You're only an entrepreneur if your parents are entrepreneurs. It seems like that's how you get into that field. So I never really saw myself that way. But I was doing things as young as 14, where I'd buy a pizza for $10 and sell it for $2 a slice and make a $6 profit. So I was dabbling in stuff as young as maybe 12 years old. I just didn't see it that way. I just, it's hard to believe as much as I say I don't like side hustling. I saw it as hustling, like just generating a little bit of revenue, a little bit of spending cash, taking your allowance and stretching it a little further. So I never thought of what I started, even though I started a lot of businesses. I started a tutoring agency. I always just used that to leverage like getting bigger jobs. So I didn't really see myself as someone who could start my own business until I was in my 30s. So I didn't start my own business until I peaked in my career. So I got my dream job at 29 and hated it within a week. I was like, my gosh, my dream came true and I regret it completely. I was working at the top in my field of English as a foreign language. I was working in the largest program at the best university in the world. There was literally no higher job. There was nowhere to go up. At 29, I had peaked. The only thing that could happen is if my manager died, then I could move up one level. But other than that, there was no other position. There was no other moves. And I didn't like it. I wasn't happy. It turned out my dream wasn't what my dream was. And I just you start to reach this point where you want to be in control. And that's the real critical element of entrepreneurship, is that it's like a trapeze with no net. So you have to be able to handle the high risk in order to enjoy the high reward. And there's something about having a really bad month and then a really good month that's the feeling that I love. Like the bullfighter waiting for the bull that almost gets you. So I like both parts. I like the risk and the reward. And as I started to realize that, when I lost that job, I said, I never want someone to have control over my destiny again. And since then, I've seen it happen to so many of my friends where they work at huge companies and they get downsized because of something that wasn't their fault.
Yeah, yeah. That security that people think they get in a big corporate, like I worked in corporate for 14 years. We probably had 2 or 3 cycles of redundancies in those 12, 14 years. So that security that people think they always have, it doesn't really exist. There's no
Those have
longer
actually
jobs
never
for life
existed outside
within
of
these sorts
Japan.
of
I don't know
corporates, is
why
there?
people think jobs for life existed, and they stopped existing in Japan in the 80s. So they existed in one country for a short window of time, and they haven't existed for over 40 years. There's this idea that we have that loyalty from a corporation is a two-way street, that if I work really hard and put in extra hours, that my boss will care about me. And a lot of people have found out over the last few years, especially, that it's not that way, that your company does not care about you. And company math is like this.
Mm.
As an employee, your boss has to pay you less than you're worth in order for the company to be profitable. If you paid everyone exactly the amount of revenue they generated for the company to operate at break even, which is a high risk position, they couldn't pay the investors or the shareholders. The job of your boss is to keep you in a perpetual state of agitation in between hope of a raise and fear of being fired. So they want to keep you bouncing between these two, like magnetic poles, if you will. So you're constantly moving back and forth. But am I going to get fired? Maybe I'll get a raise. Am I going to get fired? Maybe I'll get a raise. And it creates, of course, a massive amount of long-term stress. And there is no loyalty. And the same thing, I have
Yeah.
employees. And if one of my kids gets sick and I have to just raid the company coffers to pay for their medical bills and fire my team, I will. And everyone would. So this idea that loyalty is a two-way street, it doesn't exist. And a lot of people learn this the hard way, unfortunately. But I've been shouting from the mountaintop for over 10 years about this, almost 14 years about it now, that you are the only person in charge of your destiny. This doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur. You can also treat your career the same way. So the reason I got so high in my career is that I jumped between different universities when other people
Yeah.
were like, you just wait for your boss to give you a raise. And I was like, no, I'll just jump. I'll just use my skills to create an awesome resume, create an awesome presentation, go do a job interview and jump to another university. That's how you can move up, is by jumping between things. If you treat your career like entrepreneurship, because no one else is going to, nobody else cares about you. Like, and that's a harsh lesson to learn, but the earlier you learn it, like the more successful you'll be.
Yeah. 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 Can we just go back to the story about how you got fired from your academia job? I was reading and
Yeah.
it didn't have a lot of detail that your
So
ex-girlfriend
basically,
got you
I
fired.
like had a side business going on, and I'd written a book. I'd written a dating book, and the book was called, what was the book? I can't remember which one it was, but at the time I'd written a book about like how to fall in love. And when you join at the university, they ask if you have other things going on. And I said, well, if I've written a book, and they go, that's fine. So I'd asked about it specifically. I just didn't tell them it was a book about love or whatever. So what happened was, basically my ex-girlfriend from England it didn't work out. So then she called my job in America and nobody likes issues or whatever. So then it just became a whole thing, and they let me go. Basically, I could have fought it and I would have won. Like, I could have gone to court and spent 3 years fighting it over a job I hated. And I realized that it was the right thing for me. So when they fired me, it was a special window time where if they fired me a week later, I wouldn't have been eligible for as many benefits. So because of the week they fired me, I got 6x more benefits because of a specific program that was expiring like 2 weeks later. So if they'd waited, they would have had to pay me a lot less. So it really worked out for me. It was the right time. And sometimes you have to get kicked out of the nest. So you could spend a lot of time obsessing about why it happened, but it was the best thing that ever happened, because within 6 months I was making more than the person who fired me, and within a year I was making more than her boss. And it was not what I wanted, and I was so glad to get out of there. So they really freed me, because Josh, if I imagine if I was still there now, like I can't even, my life is, the thought of still being there is so depressing at this job, that because it's in university, same as in government, people have this massive skill to look like they're doing something while doing nothing, and I don't have that skill. They would give me a task and say, this will take 6 months, and I finished in 30 minutes, and I started crying because I don't know how to stretch 30 minutes into 6 months. To me, that's such a skill, to be able to stretch such a small job. And I was so good at the job and the parts that matter, but there's so much infighting in politics and passive aggressivism at these types of places that like have no interest in that. So it wasn't the right job for me. It ending was the right thing. It's unfortunate the way it happened, but when you break someone's heart, sometimes there's collateral damage.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Moving on, you've written over 300 books for yourself and as a celebrity ghostwriter. Get
My
into
whole
that.
story, and it's connected. My whole first journey was I used to have a blog about my dating life because funny things would happen to me all the time. And I didn't know that other people could find your blog. I thought it was a diary. So I used to write this blog about all sorts of things. I remember one time I was on a date with a girl and I said, I think we should kiss. And then a bird pooped on her right after I said it. And there's no recovery. Nobody feels, there's nothing you can do in a bathroom sink in a pub that's going to make you feel like kissing someone again, right? It's such a mood kill. And she was like, I can't believe this happened to me. And I thought, this is so normal for me. This is such a normal thing. So funny things happen to me all the time. I meet really big celebrities. When I was in Japan, with my host family, we're drinking and partying, and a guy comes in and we're taking pictures together. And I'm joking with the missing finger. And then I look at the pictures later, the guy has the missing finger. So this guy actually was a Yakuza member who'd made a mistake. And this happens to me all the time. The last time I was in London, I meet a guy in a bar. I don't know who he is. Everyone else does. This guy is really well known and really dangerous. And everyone's, do you know who you were hanging out with last night? I'm like, no, it's just some guy I met. And they're like, that guy runs like all of East London. He's the most dangerous guy in London. And I was like, and they were like, and I was like, yeah, that happens to me a lot. That happens to me all the time. Every time it happened to me when I was in Mexico, like I tend to just get around people that are, and it doesn't make sense because that's not my lifestyle at all. But so I have these like crazy adventures, dating as well, that I would write about all my misadventures. So when I'm on a date, I'm like, either it will go really well, almost never, or it will go really bad and be funny and be a good story. So that led to me writing a blog about my dating life, which became super popular. It was the number one search result. If you typed in "get a girlfriend" into Google in 2010, my blog popped up, because it was my eternal journey and my inability to get a girlfriend. And I didn't know until one day they were like, oh, you can add analytics. I clicked that button. I go, what is this? And they were like, you're getting a lot of visits. And I got a phone call from someone who said, we love your blog. Would you write a book for women, since you've written a lot about dating perspective for men? And I go, sure. So I ended up writing this book called Girl Gets Ring. And this introduced me to the world of direct response. So I didn't know this existed. The book was $67, sold from a website, and they pay me a small royalty for every sale. And that royalty ended up being over $100,000 in the next couple of years. So that it was a lot of, oh my gosh, that was a lot. I was like, you can make this. I wrote the book in 1 week. It took me 35 hours. So including the rewrites. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. And that book was such a massive hit. So many success stories. It was just teaching women how to get your boyfriend, or how to go from girlfriend to fiance. Just that. It's covered that specific window of time. I want to go from been with this guy for 6 years, how to get him propose. And really worked a lot, had a lot of dating there. I've been in the dating space in a long time. From there, other people approached me about projects, and I did a lot of direct response projects. And around 2015, I did a direct response project about potty training. I wrote a whole book or training about how to potty train your kids because I potty trained all my kids. And what I know is that nobody wants a potty training book written by the dad. It has to be written by the mom. And the client who I wrote that whole thing for, they never released it. So I said, hey, is it cool if I just rewrite it to make it unique enough and put it on Amazon? And I put it under a pen name. Massive success. Became the #1 potty training book for over a year. And if I'd known how competitive that space was, I never would have entered it. I didn't know how hard it was supposed to be. And from there, I began putting other books on Amazon, and people would find me through referrals a lot. So a lot of it came from that. So I had a reputation that just leads me. I still get enough requests. I do 3 ghostwriting jobs a year now, and it's all inbound. People ask me, do you still do ghostwriting, or what do you think of this project? So I just take a couple of projects a year that are interesting to me, but it is the reason that people hire me is that I'm fast. One time someone, oh, sure.
What is your
These
writing
days I dictate
process,
everything
Jonathan?
almost that I write for myself. I dictate everything, and that just saves so much time. If it's for a client, I get them to dictate it. So I'll ask them all the questions. My real secret is that I have a very low threshold for boring. So as soon as someone gets boring, I'll be like, no, change this is boring. This isn't going in the book. If I'm bored, the reader will be bored. So that's how I create really good books, is that I make them stop telling things that are boring. Most people, there's an inverse correlation between how interesting people think they are and how interesting they actually are. So whenever someone comes up to me and says, I have a really good story, I know it's going to be terrible. And if they say, I don't know if this is interesting. So an example is someone came up to me once, they go, I don't know if this is interesting. During the Vietnam War, I was one of 50 people who was illegally working for the CIA in Cambodia. And then after I did that for 10 years, I was
Wow.
in the CIA and my wife was undercover in the Russian ballet. Do you think people would be interested in that? And I was like, what do you think interesting means? So that was one. Another person goes, I don't know if this is interesting. I was driving a big rig truck and it crashed and I'm jackknifed. So I'm going sideways towards a gas station and I look out the window and I see a family in a minivan all staring at me in shock. Is that interesting? And I was like, have you ever seen a Bourne Identity movie? You're talking about the cold open. So whenever someone says, I think this is boring, it's
Yeah.
always so much beyond what I'm expecting. You just never expect to write that. But then what a lot of people think is that someone wants their biography, and nobody wants to read your biography. No one cares about you until you're famous. So what you have to do is teach something and then use your life experience as the narrative to make that something interesting. So that's really my methodology. And my actual process for ghostwriting is that I will ask people certain questions and then I will get them to dictate all the content of the book. And then I cut it apart like a jigsaw puzzle and reassemble the pieces in the order that matches the flow of a book. So I'll ask my most important question is the first question I ask. And I'll say, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you that I'm allowed to put in the book? And that's the intro. So
Nice.
I'll take that, cut it in half, and half that's the first chapter, half that's the last chapter. Now people have to read the whole book if they want to find out what happened. And it's a trip to the hospital, it's a diagnosis, it's losing someone you love, it's getting trapped in a bad situation. For one person, they were like skydiving and the engine died, but the plane was too low for the skydivers to jump out. So and that was another person who goes, I don't know if this is interesting. And I was like, I want to know I know you're alive because you're telling me the story and I still don't think you're going to make it. So that creates an open loop or a nested loop. The idea, like when a phone rings, you can't resist answering it. So I want to open with the most interesting thing we can about you that will create engagement, because the secret to a good book is not education. Nobody cares if you're smart. People care if they like you. So as long as I rose you above, here's the smart people think you have to demonstrate expertise. You don't. In your book, you have to demonstrate not an idiot. As long as you're above that line and people like you, your business will massively flourish, or your book will do really well. So people look for likability. And a way to demonstrate this is if you watch like a political chat show and there's an expert and they go to a political chat show from like the opposite political party channel, you don't switch with them. You don't switch with the expert. You stay with the chat people or the reporter or interviewer that you like. So that's who you follow. So likability is the most important thing. And what do we like as an underdog? We like people who know our pain or who understand how we feel. This is why we like the person who was poor and then became rich, the person who was fat and then became thin. It's really hard if you go, I was born rich, I've still always been rich. Here's how you become rich. That person's not likable. It's very hard to create likability. And that's sometimes I have to do that for people. One of my clients was so wealthy, it was really a struggle. And then there was this amazing story from his childhood about a time where his parents couldn't afford to pay for him to go to the doctor. And his entire motivation is, I never want to have a discussion in front of my kids about, hey, should we take him to a vet or like something like that? And I go, this story will make people fall in love with you. That's this, and that's my. I took me 3 interviews to get to that story, and I'm in that moment. I go, I had this feeling. I'm so good at this in my head because I found the perfect story. So you have those moments like where you're in the zone or you feel excited. So my job is to
Yeah.
elicit those moments that make people likable, and then to warn them of the stories that will make them unlikable. Because sometimes people will do things or tell stories that make them unlikable. And I try to warn them not to do it. One of my clients who it didn't work out, he goes, I want to include the story about where I canceled my wedding on the day of the wedding. And I said, you cannot do that unless you're Darth Vader. I said, you're the villain. If you leave someone at the altar, you're the bad guy. The rest of the book becomes irrelevant. You have to be the villain. That's not the hero's story. That's my job, is to let people know that how it will be perceived. Sometimes you can have a single sentence in a book. One of my clients wanted to put in a sentence about, she was like, I have a little bit of the ability, a little bit of clairvoyance or something along the lines. I was like, listen, every person who reads this book will just ask you about your ability to see the future. I was like, you cannot put that in your book unless that's going to become your entire identity, because that is such a distraction. What do you mean you can? Because I was like, I don't want to ask about anything else other than, wait, you can a little bit see the future? That's all I'm interested. I said, everything else in your book is no longer interesting. So sometimes it's my job to let them know what will happen. I'm like, just take that in one sentence. So take it out, save it for later. That's a great thing for your coaching clients, whatever, but unless that's going to become your identity. So a lot of it is knowing the structure of a book, knowing what makes a book interesting, and that just comes from, I don't read nonfiction. I only read fiction, and which fiction has to be interesting. It's only driving force. So everything I do is modeled on the hero's journey, or using, like when I read textbooks in high school, the stories were interesting that illustrated the point. So that's the focus of all the books that I create. The teaching is a small component. It's in there, but it's not the main component, because I want you to enjoy the learning. It's edutainment, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Let's talk about Serve No Master. So why don't you tell me about why you set it up
So I
and
wanted to create a
who
business
your clients
around
and how do you
2015,
serve people?
2016. I've been in business about 5 or 6 years, that I could exit from, that it wouldn't be just the Jonathan Green show. So I started trying out different domain names, and there's so many I tried that I just couldn't get. You're just trying tons of ideas. It's hard to get a domain name with 2 or 3 words. It has been that way for a long time. And there's a Jet Li movie that nobody's seen called Unleashed, and the subline of it is Serve No Master. And it's the movie where like he wears a dog collar and the guy unsnaps the collar and then he fights whoever he's in the room with. And I'm probably the only person who's seen it. Nobody's seen it, but I
No, I've not
remembered
seen
that,
it,
and I
but yeah.
thought, oh, no way that's available. So I typed it in. I go, oh my gosh, and I grabbed it. So I grabbed the domain, and the idea is that you have to be in charge of your destiny, whether you're an employee or you're running your own business. You have to be the one making the decisions, because nobody else will. Nobody else is going to pick you up from the masses and choose you to rise you up. That's not how it works.
I love what you said earlier on, Jonathan. Sorry to cut across you, but I love what you said earlier on, and I genuinely believe this, and I tell people this. No one actually cares. And it is such a freeing, like some people might think, oh, that's terrible, like no one cares about me, but actually it's very freeing, the fact that actually I can dictate where I take the path of my life, because no one really cares what I do. Like in a job, no one really cares what you do as long as you hit your targets. It's a very freeing
Yeah,
mentality
if you're
rather than a
waiting
restraining mentality, isn't
for
it?
serendipity or hope, how many times have you heard that different versions of hope is not a strategy? And as soon as you realize that hope is not coming,
Mm.
then you take action. There's a moment you realize. So I was in a natural disaster. I was in a tier 1 natural disaster, the highest level you can imagine. And when we realized nobody was coming, the Red Cross didn't come, help didn't come, nobody came. People were starving. Typhoon. So everyone's house got
Was it an
destroyed. The
earthquake?
water on the entire island was poisoned. There was no food,
Typhoon.
and it was every person for themselves. And the police disappeared. So the police and the government escaped, but no one else was left on the island. If you've ever seen Lord of the Flies, just divide that by 10. People will do whatever it takes to survive. You find out what you're capable of, okay? And once you realize no one's coming,
Yeah.
whoever realizes it first wins in that scenario. So whoever realizes, the first person who realizes you're trapped in a situation and there's certain the rules have changed, there's no rule of law, that person becomes the warlord or whatever the scenario is. So that realization that nobody else is coming, nobody else cares about you, no one else is going to save you, no one else is going to come find you, then you suddenly realize what you're capable of, and it's 10 times more than you imagined. You're capable of starting your own business. You're capable of doing whatever it takes, because we often hold ourselves back and we go, oh, I could never start my own business. What if your kid was dying? Okay. What if someone kidnapped your wife and you have to start a business in the next 7 days or you never see her again? Suddenly you find out you're capable of so much more. As soon as you remove these restrictions, these limitations you put on your head, it turns out you're capable of so much more. How often have you heard people like, oh, I don't want to do sales calls? Yeah, okay. What if it's the only way to feed your kids? Suddenly sales calls don't seem that bad. So things are only difficult when we use
Yeah.
a small scale. So everyone gets upset by like someone calling them a bad name online. I get tons of bad comments online. Okay, let's imagine like that's the worst thing that can happen to you, a negative review. Your house is on fire right now. How much do you care about those negative reviews? Suddenly they don't matter. So the scale of what matters, because I've been through like the worst situation you can ever imagine. When I got to the hospital, I had 12 hours to live. All my kids had less than 36 hours to live. Okay, so that was how bad it was. You can tell me, oh, you owe us $1 million. I'm like, I'm not going to react emotionally. I'm like, on the scale of things, my scale is so different than everyone else's that nothing really bothers. Like, I don't get involved emotionally. It just doesn't matter to me because of that scale. And so that's the difference, is that once you've been through these bigger things, it resets who you are. So realizing that nobody is going to save you, promote you. Who gets promoted? The person who draws attention to themselves, the person who steals credit or takes these other actions, right? Then do that. It's all the time you hear people say, and I come from the dating space, so I always remember it's like, oh, this girl says she only dates bad boys. Okay, then be a bad boy. She already told you what she likes, right? They only hire people who brown nose. Then be a brown noser. You just told me who they hire. You already told me the answer to your own question in your complaint. You already know what works, then do what works, right? That's all there is to it. It's that you just don't want to. And you just have to create that motivation and figure out what will drive you to achieve the goal that you want. I have two arms
So
of the
who are your
business. I have the
clients?
B2C part where I teach people. I have a lot of training courses. I teach entrepreneurs and people at the beginning of their journey how to use AI to optimize their business, how to do AI as a service, like to help other people. And then I also do that myself. So I have large companies, 50 to 250 employees, where they want artificial intelligence, but they don't know what that means. So I come in and really do a non-technical, my whole process is non-technical. I say, why don't you write a list down of everything you wish AI could solve? Give me a list of all of the problems or all of the things that annoy your team. They fall into the categories of they lower morale, but people have to do it, or they're non-revenue generating tasks, like someone who does sales calls but has to fill in forms, or where information gets lost along the way, right? You have inefficiencies in your processes. And then people write that list down. And then I say, here's the things AI can fix. Here's the things AI can't fix. And I help them to see which tools are the right tools for their situation to solve their problem, which tools are the wrong tools to avoid. And then I build some of the systems depending upon what the actual problem is. Because sometimes what they want is so specific, right? They use a very specific system for recording their calls, and then they have their own system for their CRM. So I just create the connection between those two things. So that's the only thing that I build, is those little connections. Most of what people want, they think it's artificial intelligence, but actually what they want is automation. Most of the time, I want to move data from one place to another place. And
Automation.
that's the same thing for me. That's the main thing I need in my business constantly, is keeping track of which podcasts have you been on? Did you create short clips for it? Did those get posted? That's moving data around. That's not an AI thing. That's an automation thing. So it's just that.
So So when I saw that you're as an AI consultant, you were doing this before ChatGPT really came into existence. What was the driving force for you to make that choice that you wanted to build your business around AI before AI
We've been
was
around
really a
automation for a long
popular
time.
trend as it is now?
So I had, and it goes back to this story.
Right.
It's my least favorite story to tell, but during the typhoon, we had no internet, we had no power, nothing. I had set up a bunch of automation. So emails were still going out to my following. And we get to the hospital, finally get signal, and I get a message from someone who's like, hey, you made a bunch of sales this week. Where do you want me to wire the money? And it was the exact amount we needed to pay the hospital bill. So that's why I care so much about automation. It's that
Right.
a real business, you need components that will run if you get sick, if you get tired, if you can't go online. And that's where automations come in. So I really like automations. I really
Mm.
like that particular type of puzzle. So AI is just an evolution of that. So I've been teaching people how to build online businesses, create courses, and do automations for a long time. AI is just the next evolution, and AI isn't really AI. Like when you think of AI, if you were my age, I'm in my 40s. When I was a kid in the 1980s and 90s, AI meant sentient robot, sentient computer. It doesn't seem to mean that anymore. Now it means smart word processor, right? Like smart email.
Yes.
It means slightly smarter like software.
Yeah.
That's all that it means now. So it really is the jump between AI and automation is very small because AI is not really sentient. It's not really thinking. It's just using a larger data set to generate answers.
Yeah. Can you give me an example? You don't have to name them, but can you give me an example of how you helped a business grow
Yes.
significantly
So one of the
by
projects I worked on
using
recently
automation?
was they, like every company, the most important thing is lead generation. So they had a process where they would manually research competitors in parallel industries. So for example, let's say you sell like steering wheel covers and another company sells seatbelt covers. You can look at all of that other company's customer database and go, if they bought a seatbelt cover, they might buy a steering wheel cover, right? That kind of parallel. So they had a process that would take them a really long time. And like it would take maybe 4 to 6 days for one person to generate a small number of leads by reverse engineering. Because if every company has like testimonials on their homepage and they have reviews on LinkedIn, all these different things, we post them everywhere. A lot of times those are images. So if you look at the code for the website, you can't pull the data out. You can't pull out the name or you can't find the testimonials or their video testimonials. So I built an AI machine that will visit the website, read all the data using its eyes, pull out all the really good leads, then find their contact information and generate basically a spreadsheet of these are people, here's what they said about a different company that's in a different space. Here's and here's like their LinkedIn information, here's their email address. And it takes 3 minutes to generate a report. I built this and a couple of different things like that. And then they immediately generated, I think $120,000 the first hour of using it. So really big win. Another version is, let's say you want to reverse engineer someone's like public appearances. So I built a ton of different podcast bots to use for my own show, but an example I built for one of my clients was this will find all the shows that someone else has been on and then find the host of those shows and that host's contact information. Oh, this person's like me. These shows have all had someone like me on. I would be a good fit for these shows. So it lets you do a different approach to finding shows because a lot of people are
Mm.
passive. Hosts are passive too about finding guests, right? I build versions where you can find really great guests. Like I hunt out all the people I want on my show. I want guests on my show that have been on no one else's. Like, that's the kind of thing that I do. So those are the types of machines I built. I've also built one for a client where they use the zero in emails into 4 categories so that you have like basically every email we get is either spam. I don't need to read it, but I need it just in case I need to look it up someday. Then there's like notifications and examples like, oh, you have a bill coming up this week. So you don't want to delete those. And then above that is emails you need to read, but you don't need to reply to. And then emails you actually need to reply to, which is the smallest number. So if you get 1,000 emails a day, maybe the top category is 10 or 20 emails. So suddenly your inbox goes from intimidating. So what I built
Yeah.
is something for this particular client goes, I want my phone and my computer to be synced. That means I have to set up the email sorting, not at the computer level or like when you log in, but it has to happen at the server level. So I built my own server that connects to their email server via IMAP, and it will takes the emails that come in, uses an algorithm, sends it to the AI, and says, take each of these emails and put into one of these 4 categories. An example is if an email has an unsubscribe link, well, that means it's a newsletter email, right? And that's the law; it has to have it. So that means it's going to go in the bottom category. If an email is, and it can be very smart because it's categorizing. You're just doing 4 categories. The less categories you do, the more likely it is to get them right. And all 4 are still in the inbox, but I'll check inbox. I'll check the top folder first, then the second folder. And if I need to keep going, I'll go to the rest. And if something's in the wrong folder and you move it up, then the AI needs to learn, oh, this was a mistake. Next time I iterate better. So building in that iteration. So that's something that I built for a client. And then of course once I build something for one person, I can reuse or build the same thing for another person. Oh, I can't code at all.
So are you self-taught coder or have you? So how are
Yeah,
you
I just
building
build.
these
So
things without being a
what I
coder?
do is I can envision a problem as a series of steps. So whatever you say your problem is, what I do is I break it down into the component pieces. That's my superpower. Is I can go, oh, you'll say a problem. I go, these are the 7 steps to solving it. And then I'll say, if I do A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, is that the problem? They go, yes. So first I have them confirm that I've broken it down to the correct component steps. And then I look at each step. Then I look at each part. So the first part is, okay, I have to set up a server. So I'll watch a YouTube video, set up the server. That's what I did. And then I look for different solutions to the problem. So for this specific problem, you're basically using a version of Zapier, right? If this, then that. When an email comes in, this happens. But you can't use Zapier because they charge you per email. You're going to be paying $1 million. You can't do that. So I know I have to use something where I'm not paying cost per action. So I have to use a tool called N8N. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but that's the domain. That is a Zapier. It's like a free version of Zapier you run on your own server. So I'm paying $9 a month for it on my own server. And if it goes over that, I just can expand the server because it's on DigitalOcean. Once I set up that, then I'm just setting up a Zapier, which the first step is connect to the email address, right? And you just follow the steps to connect to IMAP. So just like you would set up your Outlook or whatever email client you use, that's there. Then the second step is you send it to an AI. And so that part I'm very good. I'm very good at writing prompts and very good at creating these structures. And basically you're saying, like I explained to you, sort to these 4 categories. These are some of my ideas. And I go through an iterative process where I'll actually work with another AI and say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. These are my initial ideas. What do you see any holes in this, or how can we improve this? So that part is there. And then the other part is just sending the information back to the thing. So it's really, if you can set up a Zapier, that's most of what I do. And I use different tools. Even when I'm using an AI focused tool, it's always a multi-step process, because what clients don't want is to learn how to prompt. They don't want to learn the prompt engineering methodology. They want to push a button. They want a microwave. You put the cold burrito inside, you push a button, and a hot burrito comes out. They do not care what happened inside the microwave. So the large, this is very important if you want to be client facing. People have 2 assets, money and time. As I mentioned, at the beginning of your journey, you have a lot of time and a little bit of money. Later on, your time is so valuable, and that's the client you want. You want the client who doesn't care about your fee. They just want the problem solved. So that's much easier than the person who's like struggling to make a 7 split payment. So it also lets you work with people where there's a lot less stress on you. There's nothing worse than if someone's paying you like their last $500 a month and you're just trying to deliver for them, but this puts this huge pressure on you. Whereas other clients, you say it's a 6-month minimum. If you pay in advance, you can pay for 5 months and the 6th month is free. People with a lot of money go, yeah, I want the cheaper one. And that's great for me because now I have 6 months worth of revenue in one day. And it, obviously I love that too. So it's a win. So that's how you can understand client things. Like I see so many people offering a free consult. And I learned this lesson early on. One of the first rich clients I ever had. So sometimes you get people that you can't believe how rich they are and they're talking to you. This company was in charge of selling if you wanted to buy land for hunting in like half of America, this was the company. So the cheapest thing they sold was $1.5 million. And from there it went up. They didn't have anything below that. So if you want to have your own like deer hunting park or whatever, everything, and then it went way like 30, 50, 100 million. The guy goes, listen, My time is so
Yeah.
valuable that I'm literally losing money by talking to you. I'll set up an auto payment and I will never talk to you again. Just email and a report once a month. It's my favorite. That's the best client I've ever had. Are you kidding me? That's the dream. So I only spoke to him when I
Yeah,
stopped
that's
doing
best.
SEO. I spoke to him
Yeah,
that time and then when I closed the
yeah.
SEO business because I just didn't have time for it anymore. So that's the 2 times we ever spoke. And that's otherwise you get clients who are calling you all the time and they cut, and that's the worst. So if you want to really scale a business, you want those
Yeah, yeah.
clients, and that's how you attract them is you realize if your time is more valuable than mine and I'm offering you a free hour, what I'm actually doing is charging you whatever an hour of your time is worth. So it's actually not a value. When I do a meeting with someone, I set up 15-minute meetings because guess what? Their time is so valuable and it also demonstrates that my time is valuable. Now I leave a buffer. So if it lasts 30 minutes, it's not a problem. It doesn't go into the next one. But that's important for establishing that you understand how important their time is and they want to get their result in the least amount of their time possible.
Mm. How many
I
employees do you
grew
have?
up to as many as
Like, how
20
have you
employees and
grown your
I did not
business?
like it. It's not my skill set. I don't like managing teams. So now I just use a lot of AIs that integrate and do all of the steps for me. I have 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, contract employee. So I have one lady who runs my Pinterest and she is the perfect type of person. So here's how she runs her business. Every month, my Pinterest numbers are up. So I don't talk to her. I check once a month when the payment goes out, and she will send me a WhatsApp message once a month with like stats or something, and I'll check. I go, if numbers are up, I don't care what. I have no idea how much work she's doing, and I don't care. I don't think she's working full time. She probably has dozens of clients, but I don't care. The content is good, it's correct, and every month the numbers are higher than the previous month. That's how you get clients to leave you alone. If you want a client to never talk to you, just always over deliver. So every time I've had social media people I've worked with in the past, they always look at these dumb metrics like reach or comments or whatever. I'm like, no, all I care about is clicks.
Mm.
If you're sending clicks to my website, I'm not going to bother you. You're doing the right thing. Everything after that's my job. That's no longer your job. If you're not delivering that, I'm going to start looking at views. If you're getting a ton of views, great. And they're not getting clicks, fine. That happens, right? It's not a big deal. But as I go down and look at the next metric, the lowest one is how often are you posting? Then it starts to become a lot more, what are you doing as opposed to results based? So if you want to have a lot of clients, just over deliver on the results, and then they're never going to ask any questions. When I was doing SEO, if a client started asking me how many backlinks or things like technical things, I would go, I'm not going to work with you. I go, you're a waste. Because if that's what you care about, and I would say things like, let me ask you a question. If I make you number 1 for your primary keyword and I double your revenue, are you still going to ask for a backlinks report every month? They go, yeah, I want to see what backlinks you're doing. I go, your business is going to fail because you're an idiot. I don't want to do business with
Yeah.
you. You care about a metric that doesn't matter. And this is the same thing. And here's another metaphor from dating. I would have a guy I would be talking to and he goes, okay. I go, what's your dream? He goes, I want to talk to X number of women. I go, okay, let's say you talk to 1,000 women and none of them give you your phone number. Are you going to give me a good review? No. Then tell me what you actually want, because if you don't know what your goal is, you will never achieve it. And most people lie to themselves about whatever their goal is. They don't want to say, I want to make this much money, or I want to do this. And the successful businesses, this is why I don't like to work with businesses with less than 10 employees, because once you can't hit 10 employees unless you have switched from the micromanagement to the success metrics goal. As long as whatever the thing you want is happens, you're not going to get involved in me. You're not going to bother me. I don't want a lot of phone calls. I don't want to talk to you all the time. I just want to build my machine. It works. You're happy. Job done. That's what I want. And so that's the type of clients I try to approach. And that's the type of boss I try to be. So that's how I have my 2 full-time employees. They run things where I don't have to talk to them almost ever. And that's what I really want. And then the part-time guy, he's my video editor. I just don't create enough YouTube content for him to be full-time busy, because it takes a lot of time to make a YouTube. It's a huge amount of hours and it's not the primary. It's a small part of my business. So I put out like 1 video a week,
Yeah.
but that's not enough to keep someone fully busy. So if I was putting out like 3 or 4 videos a week, sure. That's it. That's my team.
Yeah. What do you still want to
So
achieve
I've
in
hit
your
most of
life?
my goals as far as lifestyle goals. I have my dream life, my dream wife, my dream kids. I did this exercise. There's this exercise where you write down what's your dream life, where do you wake up and what you do. So there's slight modifications that I would do, but I'd be in this house where I live doing these things, but I would slightly change my schedule, but not a lot. But I would still be living here on this island in this house, doing the same things I do. Mostly right now, what I want to achieve is moving my business to the next echelon, which is really moving to just a higher tier of revenue. So it's going good. I'm like, what if I 10x it again? Where I go to where I'm just making huge numbers, where there's never any financial pressure ever again. If there's whatever it is, we're always like so far ahead. That's where I really want to get to again. So that's really where the business is moving, is that, and that's why I'm moving from the entrepreneur space into the established space, right? Instead of early stage founders, it's like people that have crossed a success barrier, because there's mostly what I do is accelerate. So if you're a business making $50,000 a year and I improve it 10%, $5,000 a year in revenue, and then I can ask for a taste of that. If you're doing $50 million a year and I boosted 5%, now it's worth a lot more. There's a lot more revenue for me. So that's why I like to accelerate slightly larger businesses.
Yeah.
And that's really the transition that I'm going through right now. And it's really exciting for me. I love doing it.
Awesome. And so you
Yeah.
live on a tiny
So
Pacific island. Now, that must be the dream for a lot of people
yeah,
to
a lot of
have that part
people
of your
say they want to
your
do it, and then they
lifestyle.
never look at what does a flight cost? What does it cost to go somewhere? And it's usually less than you think. There are so many
Mm,
countries that have digital nomad visas, like that visa specifically for online workers, and all over the Caribbean. There's a bunch of them. I think Estonia has one. There's some cool Eastern European countries that have them. There's one for Bali. There's always different countries that are trying to bring in people. Vanuatu. And then people don't realize what the cost of living is in other countries and how it changes your tax obligations and all sorts of benefits. There's so many, there's probably 20
yeah.
tropical islands that are specifically trying to attract foreign people. And sure, some of them are looking for investors. We have to spend like $250,000, $500,000. Obviously, that's a different category. But there's a lot of them that just want, if you work online, all my money, here's how my business works. I make all my money online and then I spend it here locally. So I only move money in one direction. That's very beneficial for where I live. So a lot of people, a lot of countries want to attract that,
Mm,
where
mm,
you aren't taking any money out of the economy. If you open a store, you're not increasing the size of the economy. You're just becoming another component or node in the economy. But if you're actually
yeah.
bringing money from external to
Yeah.
that economy, you're a net benefit always. So there's a lot of cool opportunities, and it's usually just like an internet search away to find there's so many
Yeah.
amazing opportunities. And the cost of living is pretty much almost all the tropical islands. The cost of living is lower than wherever you are right now, almost always.
What a life. Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. So quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. The first question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
So in my entire life, the best decision I made, I would say, is my wife. We're complete opposites. My wife is not book learned. She doesn't come from rich family. She comes from TV commercial poor, right? Wild animal attack poor. But she has a savviness that I lack. For example, when we were in a natural disaster, it's not about money anymore. She saved our family. She has this killer instinct that I lack, if you will. I've never killed an animal. Like, I don't have that in me. Just, it's not how I grew up. Like, you don't grow up killing a pig or killing a
Mm,
snake and then eating it.
mm,
So she has this, and listen, there's anyone who's married knows there's
yeah.
plenty of downsides and a lot of challenges to it. But a lot of people go, "You're smart," and all these things. I go, "Am I the smart one?" I work full time. She doesn't work at all. We make the same amount of money. She's a genius. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you don't, she, like, my wife's life is awesome. She goes to the gym, hangs out by the beach, hangs out with the kids. Everything she does is awesome. And I'm here like sitting in the computer with you, which is fine, but I'm at work. She's not, right? Like, so, like right now, she's probably watching a movie with the kids. So that finding
Yeah.
someone who supports your kind of dreams and then has a very disparate skill set. Like, I never know what she's going to say. So there's a pros and cons to that, of course. Like, it's always a surprise. Why would you want to marry someone that's exactly like you? So there's definitely some ups and downs
Right.
and plenty of downs. But when it goes bad. And I used to say this before we had that incident. I go, if the power ever goes out, my wife's in charge. We switch roles. Power went out. We switched roles. I was right. She is the only one. If I wasn't with her at that time, I would not have made. I would be dead. So I think that's the best decision I've ever made.
Amazing. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
The best piece of advice is that you can't trust anyone outside your family. Here's a big secret. Everybody hates you. And it's hard to hear that, but how many times have you had a friend who is successful and a part of you wish it was me, right? We all want to lie and pretend it doesn't happen. Okay. One of my closest friends keeps closing crazy huge deals. Like I'll have like a tough month and he's had a rough day. I barely made 50 grand today. And I'm like, okay. And so it's in all of us. But once you realize that only your family is on this journey with you and wants you to succeed and is in alignment with you, it will help you to make better decisions. Just like letting go of the idea that your boss is looking out for you and your coworker is looking out for you. Once you start to realize that most people want bad things to happen to most other people. Like we want to pretend that's not the way the world is, but what do we watch on the news? Bad things happen to other people. What do we really want to see about a celebrity? We want to see something bad happen to them. Sure. Go ahead.
Can I just challenge you, Jonathan? I'm sorry. And no, it's an interesting point because I subscribe to your thought process that no one really cares about you, and that's quite a freeing mentality. But I don't believe that everyone wants
Sure.
bad things to happen to you. The reason why I don't watch the news 3 or 4 times a day and we hear terrible things happening in this country and that country and at home and abroad and stuff is because I don't want that amount of negativity in my life. I am part of communities, I'm part of groups, and some are better than others. Some are not networking, some are networking. And there are some people in different communities. One that I'm thinking of primarily called Boss Academy. There's a pretty good bunch of people that want you to win. I agree with you to the point. When the chips are down and there's no one else and you have to rely on your close family and your close friends to really have your corner. I agree with. But I think it's a step too far to
Well,
say everyone wants
this
bad
is
things
why I
to
live on a
happen
small
to you.
island where there's not a lot of people around me, okay? Because it's possible that I've over calibrated towards negativity, but I always think it's better to expect bad things to happen to you and be surprised when something pleasant happens than to think everything's going to be good and then you're not ready for when something bad happens. So I'm probably over calibrating, not everyone, maybe it's almost everyone or the masses in general. But the idea is that if you expect everyone to hate you and they're just neutral, then you end up with a better result. So perhaps I'm over calibrating there, but the core idea, like you said, is that once you stop expecting other people to raise you up, and most of the time, even when people participate in charity, it's usually for a selfish reason, as in they do it because it makes them feel good, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just being reality. But most of the time, we try to hide motivations or pretend people don't have selfish motivations. But once you start to realize that everyone's looking out for themselves, maybe that's a better way to say it, then you can better understand why people do the things that they do and you'll be less surprised. And you will take a more active decision in who you form alliances with and how you act to grow your life and business. So maybe it's a softer way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you prepare
Sure.
for the worst and hope for the best. That's my mentality. All right. Next question. Who's
Sure. So
helped
my
you
very first
most in your
mentor
career?
was someone I met at a conference very early on, and he was massive, making huge amounts of money, but like living on the floor of his grandmother's house in a retirement village because he'd gone through a divorce. And I was like, "Why are you living like this? What is going on?" And he was like, "Just emotionally stunted." And I was like, "I know a lot about dating, a lot about business," and we became friends. He taught me everything I knew, helped me grow my business, and I helped him like get out of that environment, like start to get back to life again, right? Get back out there, start dating again, find true love again, all those things. That alliance and that friendship launched my business, that mentorship. He taught me how to understand business and networking and how to talk to people. and all of the things that kind of became the core components of my business that I'm still living off of 14 years later.
Amazing. Tell me about a
I don't want
regret
to
you
get too
have.
specific, but a friend of mine came to me with a piece of software and goes, "Do you want to be the first person to use this? This is a new thing we're launching." I said it was a stupid idea and I'm not interested. And that company does about $100 million a year in profit. Yeah, I'm not always right.
We can all get things wrong.
No,
Is
Matt,
it still a
there's like
stupid
probably
service
50
product?
companies that are now copying it now. It's a massive success and it's not slowing down. No, he was right. I was wrong.
Okay. Um,
Hey, kids, easy.
what are you most proud of?
There's two ways. I have 5 kids. The oldest is 11. The
How
youngest
old are
is
they?
turning 4 in a few weeks. So we want to achieve immortality. So I've done it in a couple ways. I've written books that will last for a while, hopefully. Enough people have read them that kind of my legacy will last for a little while. I've changed. You get those things, your book changed my life, and that's cool. But the next level beyond that is that your kids are the next evolution of you. And so their accomplishments are very exciting for me. Like that's really most of my life is built around being a dad. Like that's the centerpiece. I don't really do cool stuff anymore. I don't travel very often. I don't go out. I don't have do the and so I guess in some ways it's boring, but it's what I want to be doing. Like most of the time, my son is like behind me. He's gotten into playing computer stuff recently. That's the AI computer, but he'll use it to play like Fortnite or Minecraft. He started playing around the computer, and I think it's cool that he's a little bit interested in the stuff that I do. Like sometimes we'll generate an AI image together and put that into a game. So those are the things that really matter. So it all my philosophy is all connected, as in the family is the most important thing. And so that's what I put most of my time and energy into. That's the thing that matters to me the most.
Yeah, amazing. What is your why? Why do you
So
do what you do?
it's like a couple of ways of answering it. So long term, the reason I like teach entrepreneurship is because believe it's the path to freedom. As far as artificial intelligence, why that's what I teach now is that most of the people who teach artificial intelligence they don't know what they're talking about. They're just the stuff they teach is so inferior or so ineffective or so distraction-y. It's all about hype. Most of the content out there is like how to make AI videos. Guess what? AI videos is worth zero. It will generate no money for any business. It will not help your business in any way. It's clever and that's it. But it's what most people want to talk about, most people are interested in. And the reason I wrote my book about AI, I read all the top books on AI and I go, these books don't work. These books have fundamental flaws in their programming methodology and they're going to destroy people. When I started creating products, one of the reasons I create products, I have this core philosophy is that it has to work. A lot of people don't feel that way. And I knew someone. So when I was in like the dating coaching space, coaching men and women, doing all that stuff, helping people find love, I knew other people who were in the space who shouldn't have been, who didn't know what they were talking about. And there's a story about a guy who was teaching someone else and Donnie was talking. So the guy didn't get results. And then the guy went to a gym and he killed a bunch of people. And I hate that coach from the core of my being because he sold a product that didn't work. And because of him, 6 people died. And I think about that every day because you think about your business. And a lot of people do this. There's a lot of people that are very big that sell products that don't work or they're missing a core component. And they think it's just a couple $1,000s. And then they destroy someone's life. And that leads to domino effects, right? So my core centerpiece of my being is that I only teach systems that work. I don't overpromise. So my sales pages aren't as hypey as other people's. I don't say things like, this can make you $75 million, which would outsell. Like the bigger you promises, the more units you sell, sure. But my core philosophy, and this is the centerpiece of everything I do, is that you have to do things that work. Sure, there are people who buy my programs and then they don't go through them, right? So then it is like but that's not my fault. If you go through it, it works. That's the most important thing to me. As a course creator, as a product creator, as an author, that's always been the centerpiece that whatever I put together, it works. And that's my driving force. And then my driving force, artificial intelligence, is really there's so much bad information and so much misuse and so much dumbness and that like people will go through someone else's program. It doesn't work. They go, oh, I guess AI doesn't work. Then they go back to work, and then they see, hey, everyone who's not good at AI is fired.
Mm.
That person loses their job. They go and look for a job, and every job says 3 years of ChatGPT experience mandatory. So now they're ejected from the job force. That person's life is destroyed by someone else's book. So that's why I wrote my book. That's my driving force. So it's the same thing from all of my careers that I create when I see that the other information out there is inaccurate or that it's not really helpful. Most AI products are simply ChatGPT wrappers. So instead of paying $20 a month for ChatGPT, you pay $60 for a tool that just uses ChatGPT plus someone else's prompt hidden inside it. That's not really what I want to do. I could build a bunch of those, sure, and build a cool business, whatever. It's not what I want to do. That doesn't interest me. It's not the future of my business, and it's a short-term plan. I really am driven. My why is I want people to have a path to financial freedom that actually works, like a system that works. And I want them to have the ability to succeed and use artificial intelligence to spend more time with their families and less time at their job. And that system has to work. So that's like my core thing is it just has to work.
And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
So the best place to find me where I'm most active is on LinkedIn, but you can also find my website. Everything is Serve No Master. Every social platform, if you Google Serve No Master, the first 100 results are all me. So you're always going to find me. But servenomaster.com is a centerpiece of my business. Serve No Master is my book. Serve No Master is my social media name. Find me everywhere. That's the easiest way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. It's been fascinating hearing the different stories that you've had in your background and your life and how you're using AI. We could almost do another episode just on AI, so maybe we'll come back to that at a later stage. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Business Growth Talks. This podcast is released every Monday, so don't miss an episode by subscribing to all podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Have a great day.